The weak need noise to mask their insecurity. The strong do not. You don't have to raise your voice to prove anything if you truly hold power within. In a room filled with voices competing to be heard, the one who makes everyone pause and listen is often the one who says nothing at all. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the full presence of composure, because when you no longer feel the need to interrupt, to seize attention, or to fill the space with words, that is when you begin to master your own energy. Nothing shows strength more than someone who can sit still in chaos, unshaken, unbothered, with no need to explain or justify. They're not drawn into the ego's game. They don't flinch at a cold glance, a disrespectful remark, or a minor slight, because they know the less you feel the need to prove, the more you truly possess. The fewer your words, the greater your weight. True magnetism has never come from noise. It lies in depth, and depth makes no sound. Silence is a deliberate choice. The weak fall silent because they have nothing to say. The strong choose silence because there is too much they don't need to say. The difference lies here. Are you quiet out of insecurity, or because you've moved past the need for validation? A person not yet grounded will use words to patch over the emptiness, but someone who has built an inner foundation will choose stillness as a strategy, not to avoid, but to observe, to assess, and to reserve their response for the moment of greatest impact. Silence does not make you appear weaker. It confuses people, and that confusion creates power. When you don't react as they expect, they lose their footing. When you don't justify as they hope, they lose control. When you don't let emotions dictate you, you force them to adjust their behavior. Instead of letting them dictate your reactions, you make them reflect on their own actions. Silence is a form of unspoken control. You don't need to shout for others to know you're displeased. A steady gaze, a firm withdrawal, a resolute distance, these are more powerful than hundreds of words of reproach. The fewer words, the more weight. People don't fear yelling, they fear silence. Not because it's lacking, but because it forces them to confront themselves. The more silent you are, the louder they hear their own thoughts, where excuses can no longer hide the truth. It's no coincidence that the most influential people rarely speak too much. They don't rant, don't complain, and don't seek to be the center of attention. They simply show up with a still presence that alters the rhythm of the space around them. This is power that needs no promotion, no proof, no persuasion. It simply is, and it is precisely that simplicity that makes it impossible to ignore. Those lacking composure often mistake silence for weakness, for cowardice, for avoidance. But they don't realize this. It takes immense strength to remain calm and not react. It takes deep inner steadiness to feel no need to defend yourself. And it takes true clarity to resist being pulled into cheap provocations. In fact, silence is the rejection of the false power others try to impose on you. You don't need to play their game. You just need to stand firm in your own. The truly mature no longer react with words. They react with a decision to stay still, because they know speaking up may not solve anything, but staying silent always preserves their position of power, and in every relationship, the one who keeps composure holds the higher ground, even when not a single word is spoken. Today's world is too noisy. Everyone wants to speak, to be heard, to be seen, and for that reason, silence has become rare, and rarity holds value. People don't fear those who talk too much. They fear those who say little, but still command presence. People don't respect the loud, they respect those who can restrain themselves, because restraint is a form of intelligence, a reflection of inner power that has outgrown the need for instant gratification. Someone who talks too much might sway emotions for a moment, but someone who stays silent at the right time will shift the entire situation, not with words, but with presence. And that's what makes them formidable. If you want to be heard, speak less. If you want to be respected, don't argue. If you want to stay in control, hold on to your stillness. not to endure, but to command, not to retreat, but to see the whole picture. Silence doesn't make you invisible. On the contrary, it makes you unpredictable. And unpredictability always keeps others on their toes. In this world, it's not the louder voice that wins. It's the one who knows when to speak and when to hold back. The less they can read your thoughts, the more you hold your ground. The fewer the words you use, the more power each one carries. Think of the people you admire most in life. Aren't they often soft-spoken, calm, and clear in their actions? They don't promise much, but they always follow through. They never explain too much, yet everyone understands what they're doing and why. Their silence is the product of maturity, not absence. And if you want to become that kind of person, the one whose silence alone draws attention, then start now. Speak less, deepen your message. React less, increase your awareness. Show less, increase your hidden value. That is how you speak, not just through words, but through your presence. And sometimes presence, when delivered with clarity, is louder than 1,000 explanations. Every time you explain yourself, you open the door for others to step into your private energy space. And not everyone who enters brings understanding with them. Many are merely waiting for you to speak so they can start dismantling, doubting, arguing, or using your words against you. The more you try to be understood, the more you risk losing your peace. The more you try to prove something, the further you drift from the strongest version of yourself. Not everyone deserves access to your reasons, your pain, or your decisions. And not everyone is mature enough to listen without judgment. Once you realize this, you'll stop wasting your words. The urge to explain comes from a deep sense of insecurity, the fear that if you don't clarify, others will misunderstand. But what you forget is this: those who want to misunderstand will do so no matter how many times you explain. And those who truly understand, you don't need many words. In this noisy world, your silence is not because you lack answers, but because you've seen the futility of explaining to minds already closed to receiving. Not every question deserves an answer. Not every doubtful gaze needs to be soothed. Over-explaining is a symptom of a lack of trust in yourself. You believe that if you don't lay it all out, people will judge you wrongly. But the truth is, you don't need to control their judgment. What others think isn't within your authority, but how much you let that affect you is entirely up to you. When you stop explaining, you are telling the world, I do not need your approval to continue being myself, and it is precisely that quiet confidence that makes others begin to reconsider their attitude. And explaining is also a subtle way of signaling that you're seeking agreement. But those who truly live with direction don't need agreement to act. They only need inner clarity. When you no longer feel the need to convince anyone, you've taken a major step forward in maturity. You no longer negotiate with your own truth. You no longer base your self-worth on someone else's reaction. And that's when you begin to operate at your highest energetic frequency, calm, decisive, and untouchable by external scripts. Many people in your life don't want answers. They want reasons to control you. They don't ask because they care. They ask so they can insert themselves, reshape your thinking, make you doubt your own decisions. They don't seek understanding, they seek influence. And every time you over-explain, you hand over the blueprint of your emotional system, showing them where to attack, where you're soft, where you fear being misunderstood. But when you hold your words, you hold your power. When you speak less, you confuse them, and in that confusion, you reclaim the steering wheel. Silence is not avoidance. It is a conscious choice not to exhaust yourself in conversations that lead nowhere. Not everyone needs to know why you're pulling back. Not everyone deserves to be invited into your inner world just because they knock on the door. Remember, you owe no one an explanation for the boundaries you set to protect yourself. You don't have to justify why you need alone time. You don't have to prove why you no longer want to continue a relationship, a job, or a cycle that depletes you. Your silence is a statement of truth. Those who are attuned will understand. People are used to you responding, so when you don't, they're forced to confront the silence, and within that silence, they begin to see themselves clearly, their overreactions, their selfishness, their entitled patterns. Silence is a mirror. It reflects what noise usually hides. When you stop explaining, you not only preserve your own energy, you also force others to self-reflect. And sometimes that is the most profound lesson you can give a relationship. Silence, so they can hear the echo of their own shortcomings. How many times have you fallen into the loop, trying to explain? They don't get it. You get upset. You try harder and end up drained. That's because you've been pouring energy into a channel that isn't open to receive. And if you keep doing that, you don't just lose clarity, you begin to lose faith in yourself. Don't turn your words into a tool for erasing yourself in front of others. Let silence be your final statement. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I don't need your agreement for it to have value. Those with real influence always know when to speak and when to hold back. They understand that wisdom isn't about having an answer to every question, but knowing which questions don't deserve a response. When you become selective with what you say, you are training your inner discipline. And inner discipline is the foundation for maintaining emotional stability in a world constantly trying to pull you into chaos. Refusing to explain is not arrogance, it is protection. It's not that you don't respect others, it's that you choose to respect yourself more. You're sending a clear message. I will not drain my energy on things that don't nourish me. And those who understand that won't ask. Those who don't, no amount of explaining will help them understand. True maturity doesn't lie in how many people you convince to take your side. It lies in the ability to stay quiet even when no one understands you. Because you know, no one can undo what has been chosen by a heart that is strong enough. And when you stay silent in clarity, the world begins to adjust itself to your movement, not with noise, not with agreement, but with the certainty radiating from within you. That is the highest form of power. And you've always had it. You just wasted it on words that were never needed. Now is the time to reclaim it by simply choosing to stop explaining. Reaction is instinct. Observation is mastery. In a world full of constant stimulation, from careless words, disrespectful behavior, to situations that easily bruise the ego, the weak react instantly. The strong pause to observe, not because they don't notice, but because they see more deeply. They don't react immediately, not because they don't feel pain, but because they are reading people, situations, and even themselves. In an age where everyone is easily led by impulsive emotions, the one who knows how to pause and observe holds a lasting advantage. Most of the mistakes we've made didn't come from ignorance, but from the lack of patience to look carefully before responding. You say something not because you've thought it through, but because you want to defend yourself. You push back against a comment, not because you know you're right, but because you can't tolerate the feeling of being doubted. And in doing so, you fall into the classic trap of impulsiveness, an instant emotion leading to a long-term consequence. When just a moment of slowing down, a step back to see the full picture, could have saved you from the need to explain anything at all. Observation is the weapon of the composed. They quietly read the room, measure the emotional frequency of others, detect subtle shifts in tone, and from there shape their response, or choose not to respond at all. They're not driven by an ego that craves victory, but by a wisdom that knows not every battle is worth engaging. Not every comment deserves a reply. When you're solid within, you begin to understand the true value of remaining silent, of observing thoroughly rather than reacting hastily. The intelligent don't need words to establish their stance. They use presence, gaze, and calm to demonstrate superiority. The less you are ruled by immediate emotions, the clearer your thinking becomes. And from that clarity, you see the essence of the problem instead of being swept away by its appearance. Most of what people show is just a mask. Only when you observe deeply, quietly, can you see the real motives behind their actions. And sometimes what you think is an insult is simply an unhealed wound in the other person. This awareness not only helps you avoid thoughtless reactions, but also gives you complete agency in communication and decision-making. Those who don't know how to observe often speak too soon, act too quickly, and regret too late. They lose the chance to understand because they're too busy resisting. Meanwhile, those with true inner strength always insert a pause between stimulus and response. That pause is where wisdom emerges. When someone says something upsetting, you have two choices: react immediately to satisfy a personal emotion, or pause to observe, to see the full context, assess the real meaning, and offer a deliberate response. The wise always choose the latter, because they know every time you react without control, you are handing over your power to someone else. Observation is also the art of reading people, an underrated skill in today's noisy world. When you observe long enough, you begin to notice subtle signals that the impatient miss: a disapproving glance, an anxious pause, a forced, furrowed brow, a fake smile. These details are valuable data, revealing what's really happening in the other person's mind, things they're not saying, and from there, you not only understand others better, but you also protect yourself from situations full of hidden traps that seem harmless on the surface. When you take time to observe, you don't just read others, you also read yourself. You begin to see clearly the points that make you vulnerable, the moments when you overreact, the fears that cause you to lose control. And it is from that self-observation that you can start to adjust. One cannot master others without first mastering oneself. And mastery, it doesn't come from force. It comes from understanding the inner emotional system, knowing what triggers you, and learning how to steer your energy so you don't lose yourself in any situation. Don't let yourself be pulled into reaction just because someone wants to see you lose composure. A contemptuous look doesn't diminish you unless you react as if it's true. A hurtful comment doesn't weaken you unless you strike back as if you're under threat. When you choose stillness, you force others to confront the absurdity of their behavior. When you don't respond, you're saying, I'm operating on a different level where calmness is how I preserve my dignity. And in that calm, you create an energy field that causes others to adjust, not because you demanded it, but because they feel it. Of course, this isn't easy. In a world that encourages instant reaction, you must be exceptionally conscious not to get swept away, but you'll soon realize once you've trained yourself to observe instead of react, you'll feel lighter, stronger, and freer, because you're no longer being controlled by the outside. You begin acting based on values, not emotions. You choose the right moment, not just to retaliate, but to create real impact. Observation over reaction is the art of silent leaders. Those who don't need to talk much to earn respect, who don't need to win every argument to maintain their position. They let composure be their gravity and subtlety be their guide. And because they're not driven by the need to react, they always see the path ahead, foresee outcomes, and know exactly when to stop and when to move forward. Nothing is more valuable than a mind calm enough not to react too soon. And nothing is more powerful than someone who observes everything while remaining internally undisturbed. If you want to create real change, start with the simplest but hardest thing. Observe first, react later. And gradually you will realize you no longer live as a reflex, but as a fully aware being. And that is the beginning of a power that cannot be shaken. You will never see a true lion needing to roar just to be recognized as king. It doesn't always make noise. Its very presence is enough to make the weak adjust their behavior. Truly strong people are the same. They don't need many words. They don't need to argue. They don't need to be heard. They simply show up with such solid inner strength that no one can ignore them. In a world where noise overshadows truth, calmness becomes rare. And therefore, the most valuable thing People often confuse talking a lot with leadership, constant speaking with real influence. But think back to the people you genuinely respected. Weren't they often the ones who spoke the least? And when they did speak, every word carried weight, not because of fancy phrasing or emotional appeal, but because behind those words were depth, experience, and long periods of observation and validation. They don't speak to impress. They speak when necessary, and because of that rarity, their words leave a deeper resonance than any grand speech ever could. Those who need to talk a lot are often those who don't yet know how to be present with energy. They need words to fill the gap of internal instability. They need to be heard to feel worthy. But someone who understands their value doesn't need to speak much. They know that sometimes words dilute the message, that silence preserves the purity of intent, and that power doesn't lie in endless talking, but in the ability to make others adjust before you even say a thing. The quietness of a person is never a lack. It is a form of discipline. The ability to restrain the reflex to speak just for the sake of it, and instead to be selective. Speaking when necessary, when certain, when the words truly create change. Strong people don't use words to defend themselves. They let their presence, their actions, and their results speak for them. Because they know well, those who need convincing are often not worth the effort, and those who are perceptive need no lengthy explanation. In any confrontation, the one who talks the most is usually the one losing control. The one who remains calm, maintains a steady gaze, and keeps their breath even is the one in charge. They don't need to shout to gain dominance. They just need to stand still, firmly enough not to be swayed by any provocation. And that unsettles the opponent, because nothing disorients someone trying to attack more than unshaken silence. Strong people don't use words to fill the gaps. They know some spaces are meant to stay empty, because it's in that emptiness that others begin to look inward. The fewer your words, the more effort others must make to guess what you're thinking, and when they can't guess, they lose control. In the strategy of communication, sometimes saying nothing is the most powerful way to command attention, because you give them no data to manipulate. You allow them to expose their truest selves in their own insecurity, in their attempt to fill the silence you left behind. Never underestimate the power of a nod, a composed gaze, or a deliberate silence. These, when used at the right time, carry more weight than 100 responses. You're not silent because you lack words. You're silent because you know that words don't make you more right. Your composure, self-control, and strength in choosing not to explain, these are your clearest declarations. The strongest people always choose minimalism in speech. They let actions be their language. They know that results are the most persuasive form of justification. Look at the masters, the great leaders, the ones with real influence. They don't scatter their words carelessly. They don't speak every day, don't comment on everything, don't interrupt every discussion, but when they do speak, the room quiets. When they make a statement, everyone listens. Not because they shout louder than others, but because they carry an inner force that no one can ignore. It's the energy of certainty, of restraint without any lack of power. Strong people don't seek attention. They attract attention by not needing it. They don't try to impress. They impress others precisely because they don't try. And this paradox creates the most powerful kind of magnetism. You want to understand them, but they don't speak first. You want to hear from them, but they only speak when it truly matters. Because of this control, strong people compel others to be more serious, to listen more carefully, to adjust themselves, just to be in their presence. The more mature you become, the more you realize that words should come last. Before them should be observation, empathy, thoughtful reflection, and clear intention. A word spoken too early is a weak word. A word spoken at the right moment is power. And sometimes saying nothing at all is the highest form of influence. The weak fear being misunderstood, so they over-explain. The strong are willing to let others assume because they know those with enough wisdom will understand. Those without, it's useless to explain anyway. If you want others to listen when it matters, speak less when it doesn't. If you want your words to carry weight, learn to respect silence. If you want to be respected, stop just before giving another unnecessary explanation. The strongest people don't need to say much, because their presence alone is a statement no one can argue with. And that's exactly why they cannot be dismissed. Not because they're master persuaders, but because they are too clear to need persuasion at all. People often reveal their true nature in moments of silence. When you stop initiating conversation, stop explaining, stop trying to maintain or warm up the connection. It's within that stillness that motives, habits, levels of respect, and the authenticity of a bond become clear. When you stop speaking, stop reaching out, stop constantly giving, you create space for things to speak for themselves without you having to say a word. And that's when the truth surfaces. Who truly needs you and who only needed you for temporary gain? Stillness is the most silent and fair test. No force, no pressure to engage, no noise to distract awareness. Only raw presence remains. And in that state, everything artificial begins to fall away. The genuine will stay. Those who only know how to live behind a role will quietly retreat. Relationships built on mutual care will continue to exist. One-sided bonds, where one side only knows how to take while the other always gives, will naturally dissolve. You don't need to draw conclusions. You only need to be silent and observe. We often think that to know someone's heart, we need dialogue. But in reality, words reflect only a tiny fraction. Many speak well and behave politely, but their actions contradict what they say. They say comforting things, do agreeable things, but those things don't align with their real inner values. So if you want to know who is truly there for you, don't just listen. Watch during the times you are silent. When you stop stimulating them with your presence, your care, or your explanations, you'll clearly see how they act. Do they still remember you, respect you, make an effort? Genuine people don't need you to speak to continue the connection. They sense the shift in your rhythm. They hear the silence within you. They notice your quiet withdrawal and don't ignore it. Whereas surface-level people only maintain contact when you still serve their emotions or needs. When you go quiet, they don't reach out. When you stop checking in, they disappear from your life. And that is not a loss, it's a cleansing. Stillness also helps you discern what is real within yourself. In the moments when no one is pushing you, when the noise of society quiets down, when external eyes are no longer watching, you'll see clearly what it is you truly want. Many people go through life without realizing they are merely reacting to the expectations of others. They don't live for themselves, but for approval. Their choices aren't free, but shaped by assumptions. But with enough stillness, you will feel which path aligns with your core. Because stillness is an undistorted mirror. It reflects truth without the added color of fear or expectation. Stillness is also an antidote to one-sided relationships. When you stop being the one who always keeps in touch, you'll discover who's truly holding on to you and who is simply used to being coddled. When you stop calling, stop texting, stop initiating, you'll see if the other person steps forward or stays behind, stuck in their comfort. And within that distance, you reclaim your value. Not by demanding, but by creating space for the truth to surface on its own. Don't rush to feel disappointed when your silence causes someone to leave. Don't hastily label it as betrayal or ingratitude. They haven't changed. It's just that until now, you spoke too much, reached out too often, and couldn't see it clearly. Stillness doesn't break a relationship. It only reveals its true nature. And that clarity, though painful, is a necessary gift so that you no longer invest in places that are unworthy. Stillness doesn't kill connection. It peels back illusions you unconsciously maintained. Some truths only emerge when you stop. A solid relationship doesn't need constant talking to survive. It stands firm in silence because its roots are trust. Meanwhile, a bond built on noise, on clinging, slowly dies in silence because it was never strong to begin with. The genuine do not fear silence. Only those with something to hide find stillness threatening. You don't need to tell people you're hurt, disappointed, or in need of care. Your silence is enough for those who truly care to feel it. And if they don't feel it, don't come, don't ask. Then you already have your answer. Not everyone is bad, but not everyone offers you the kindness you deserve, and you don't need to force yourself to stay in someone's life just because you're afraid of being judged for changing. Illness is not withdrawal, it's your way of giving others the opportunity to reveal their true stance. Silence doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't need labels like anger, test, or evaluation. It is simply a pause long enough for you to see who stays when the music stops playing. And that is valuable, because those who remain aren't there for gain, for routine, or for familiar scripts. They are there out of genuine presence. As for those who leave, you know they never intended to stay. Stillness is not just an action, it is a chosen state. It is when you decide to stay quiet, to see more clearly, when you no longer feel the need to fill every space with words, actions, or proof, when you are strong enough not to fear losing anyone, solid enough to accept the truth, even if that truth leaves you a little lonely. But after loneliness comes lightness, because you've cleared away the things that were never real in your life. From today, try, just once, not to text first, not to ask first, not to explain, not to hold on with words. Let silence do its job. It will lead you to the truth. It will strip away illusions. And more importantly, it will bring you back to your center of power, where you no longer chase anyone, clarify anything, or beg for a response. Because you understand what's real, people, bonds, purposes, doesn't need loud declarations. They stand on their own, even when everything around them falls quiet. Not everyone who moves ahead has to run fast, and not everyone who talks the most is the one leading. In the game of wisdom and power, the winner is not the loudest one, but the one who knows how to stay hidden at the right moment. Just like in a game of chess, a skilled player doesn't need to announce each move. They observe the opponent, read the board, calculate quietly, and then strike when the other side least expects it. Silence is not passivity. It's the strategy of someone who understands that to get ahead, sometimes you need to step back for a moment, but with eyes wide open and a mind fully alert. The world often praises those who are proactive, but it confuses proactivity with noise. People assume the ones who speak up most, who make big declarations, who are always at the forefront, are the ones in control. But in reality, the more someone speaks, the more they reveal. The more they expose, the easier they are to read. Wise people don't let their thoughts show. They let others reveal themselves first, then choose the perfect moment to act. And precisely because of that patience, they're always ahead, even if their steps remain silent. The one who speaks first often loses because they give away their strategy. Those who need recognition too early end up losing control. Meanwhile, those who stay silent and wait hold the real power. They let others assume they're idle while their internal systems are already in full motion. They don't need applause for every idea. They don't need praise for every plan launched, because they understand speaking too soon invites doubt, invites envy, invites interference. The strongest plan is the one no one knows about until it's fully formed. And a true leader never lets noise interrupt that quiet process. Silence is a form of strategic power. It doesn't come from retreat, it comes from control. Control over the urge to show off, control over the craving to be heard, control over the desire for external validation. The one who leads isn't the one who reveals themselves first, but the one who holds their best card until the perfect moment. And it's that waiting that keeps them ahead, not in time, but in vision. The more someone needs to prove themselves, the easier they are to manipulate. They react to every comment, try to correct every misunderstanding, and waste energy protecting their image. Meanwhile, those who are truly strong spend their energy preparing. They know when to reveal and when to conceal. They don't let others predict their moves, don't offer up excess information. Their silence doesn't create emptiness. It creates depth. Within that depth, every plan is carefully nurtured, far from prying eyes and the chaos of gossip. Those who rush to impress often end up exposing their weaknesses. In trying to make an impression, they talk too much, share too much, and slowly give away what should have been kept. Meanwhile, the silent ones keep others on edge. You can't guess what they're thinking. You don't know what they'll do. You don't know where they are in the process, and that ambiguity becomes the safest zone for an ahead-of-the-curve strategy. You can't stop others from competing with you, but you can make it impossible for them to keep up, simply by not letting them see what you're doing. Silence reduces noise. It keeps your mind free from unnecessary advice, distracting opinions, and suspicious gazes. When you stay quiet, you stay on course. You're not swayed by others' expectations. You're not pulled off track by fleeting praise or criticism. And because of that, you go further, deeper, more precisely. Those who don't need to publicize their process can focus more fully on the outcome. They don't say, "I will." They let results speak instead. And that's what makes them impossible to ignore. What's surprising is, the more silent you are, the more closely you're watched. The right kind of silence doesn't make you invisible. It makes people watch you more attentively. They can't predict you, so they become more curious. They don't know what goal you're aiming for, so they stay cautious. And that puts you in a position that commands respect. Truly successful people never feel the need to announce every step. They let their outcomes become the most convincing statement. You don't need to say you're changing, just change quietly. You don't need to announce that you're learning something new, just get better day by day. You don't need to share your dreams for approval, just build them silently and let the world be stunned when they become real. Wise people don't fight competition. They neutralize it by keeping every important detail hidden. And because of that, they're always ahead, always surprising, always leaving others scrambling to catch up. Silence holds a special power. It not only shields you from external noise, but also nurtures internal stability. When you're not caught up in the loud race, you have time to adjust, to look closely at the map of your life, to evolve without being interrupted, and to walk at your own true pace, not the pace society expects from you. The one who gets ahead doesn't need to arrive first. They just need to arrive at the right moment, better prepared than anyone imagined. Let silence be the foundation for action. Don't waste energy on announcements. Invest it all in preparation. When you're ready, your presence will naturally make an impact. When you show up, your results will speak for themselves. When you speak, people will listen. Not because you need their agreement, but because you have something worth saying. Those who truly lead are never in a rush. They simply move forward quietly, so that by the time others are still talking, they've reached a place where words are no longer necessary. Silence is not a sign of weakness or hiding. It's the strategy of someone who knows. The one who speaks the least is often the one who acts the most, and action has always been the most persuasive declaration for every goal in life. The more you chase something, the more it slips out of reach, not because it moves too fast, but because the energy of lack within you is pushing it away. When you pursue something with the mindset that you must have it at all costs, you're sending a silent signal, "I am not enough." And from that moment, you lose the gravitational pull of natural attraction. You are no longer the center, you become dependent. You no longer create value, you're merely trying to impress. And the saddest part is, the more you need something, the more you cling to it, the more suffocated it feels by your attachment. Chasing is not just an action, it's an energy. It's when you're constantly initiating, constantly trying to prove your worth, constantly justifying your place, hoping to be chosen, to be kept, to not be left behind. But the more you do that, the more you dim the light that once radiated from within. No one is truly drawn to something that is too accessible, too eager to sacrifice itself without keeping something for its own soul. When you chase others, opportunity, success, affection, you drain your uniqueness and blend into a behavior that feels like begging. From that moment, you're no longer seen as someone of value. You're seen as a backup plan. Everything truly meant for you won't need to be chased. Because the essence of alignment is mutual attraction, you don't need to strain to hold on, nor run to stay within someone's view. Look closely. People are often drawn to those who need them the least, not because indifference is charming, but because someone who needs nothing is someone who lives from fullness within. And that fullness always sparks curiosity, admiration, even a longing to be near. On the other hand, the energy of lack gives off a scent that everyone wants to avoid. You don't need to constantly text someone to be remembered. You don't need to initiate conversation just to be present in their life. You don't need to remind them of your existence through awkward gestures. If the connection is truly meaningful, even a quiet absence is enough to be felt. And if they feel nothing, don't reach out, don't try to find you, then you shouldn't regret it. Because anything that must be clung to in order to survive will eventually slip away. Use that time to elevate yourself, to make yourself impossible to ignore, so that every time you walk into a room, your presence alone makes others straighten their posture. When you spend your energy chasing someone, you're handing over your inner center to them. But when you pull that energy back, investing it in your discipline, your development, your growth, you begin to generate a magnetic field that doesn't beg, it attracts. That's when opportunities come to you. The right people step in, doors open. Not because you knocked louder, but because you've become someone worth welcoming. Exhaustive pursuit doesn't just wear you out, it clouds your perception. When you want something too much, you start idealizing it. You begin to imagine things that aren't real. You ignore red flags. You cling to a version of someone that even they can't maintain for long. And the worst part is, you forget to check in with yourself, to ask whether you've lost your essence in the effort to prove your worth. Don't let being chosen be the reason you lose your value. Let your presence speak so loudly that others ask themselves, am I worthy of keeping this person in my life? Those who no longer chase are the ones who understand the law of attraction, not through cliches, but through experience. They've chased before and realized they were only losing their self-respect bit by bit. They've tried to hold someone back and discovered that person still left just a little later. From those collisions, they no longer live in urgency to prove. They begin to live in calm discernment, not because they no longer need anything, but because they know what's truly worthy won't require them to trade their dignity to have it. The quieter you become, the more clearly you'll hear what's truly aligned with you. The less you chase, the more space you create for what fits to find you. Not because you're passive, but because you've actively recentered yourself. Returned to a version of you that is whole, autonomous, and naturally magnetic. When you stop chasing, you exit the game of emotional manipulation. You no longer wonder what to do next to be chosen. Instead, you start asking, does this deserve me? Does it reflect the values I'm building? Do I have to lose anything essential to keep it? And those questions, not urgency, will guide you toward what's truly worthy. Remember, the flower never has to run to the bee. It only needs to bloom at the right time and the right way and hold its own fragrance. The bee will come. The opportunity will come. Love will come. The right people will come, not because you shouted, stretched out your arms, or ran faster, but because you held enough value to be recognized, even in silence. And that is the pinnacle of attraction. When you no longer try to attract anything, yet everything flows to you as a natural reflex. From today on, stop, not because you're giving up, but because you've started to understand. What's truly meant for you will never require you to lose yourself to keep it. Let everything choose you when you've become valuable enough not to chase. And that's when you're no longer the one being chosen. You become the one who chooses. With a clear gaze, with an irreplaceable presence, and with a heart no longer bound to external validation. That is true freedom, and you deserve it. You don't need to announce everything you're doing. You don't need to update your progress for people who don't truly care. You don't need to broadcast your dreams, plans, or goals just to receive a few hollow words of encouragement. What you're building isn't a presentation. It's a quiet construction. And when it's strong enough, big enough, real enough, it will create its own echo. That echo doesn't come from your voice. It comes from depth. No need for promotion, just execution. No need for promises, just completion. That's how those with true stability operate. They don't talk, they act. Sharing your plans too early doesn't speed you up. On the contrary, it distracts you. When you speak something out loud, your brain tends to feel as if part of it has already been accomplished. That illusion of satisfaction weakens your motivation to actually follow through. Worse still, you unknowingly invite unnecessary attention, unwanted doubt, and interference from people who don't understand the process you're going through. A dream in its infancy is the most fragile thing. It doesn't need an audience. It needs quiet nurturing. Those who work in silence understand the value of keeping energy within. They don't waste it on words, responses, or explanations. They lay every step with patience, precision, and true commitment. There's no need to prove to anyone that they're serious. Time will do that. Results will do that. The final achievement will be the undeniable answer to every previous doubt. And at that point, you won't need to explain, because your outcome will be the clearest form of explanation. Some people spend their entire lives stuck in the cycle of plan, talk about it, don't act, then plan again. They live in the illusion of progress while nothing actually moves. That's the sweet trap of early validation. You receive applause for something not yet done, and then fall asleep in that feeling. Silent workers don't get caught in this game. They don't need cheerleaders at the starting line. They keep the fire within burning, not to make noise, but to last long enough to reach the finish line. Silence protects you from noise. When you don't reveal your plans or declare your goals, you avoid disguised negativity, masquerading as advice. You don't have to hear things like, "Are you sure you're capable? The market's tough right now. Maybe you should think it through." Those words aren't always born from concern. Often they are how others project their fears onto you. And once you let their fear plant itself in your mind, you slow your own process. Not everyone deserves to see your journey. Some people should only see the result. Some should only find out at the end, because their gaze, their thoughts, and their energy don't nourish your process. They interrupt it. They don't need to know how early you wake up, how many parties you skip, or what you've sacrificed. They only need to see one thing: you made it. And when that happens, no explanation is necessary. Your presence, mature and backed by results, will be your sharpest statement. Working in silence is also a way to respect yourself. You're not seeking outside encouragement. You don't act for someone else's gaze. You move because you chose to, and you take full responsibility for that choice. You don't need to share to feel less alone, because you've learned to accompany yourself. And that is the highest level of autonomy. You no longer need approval to keep going. You move because you are grounded. Silent workers don't need to narrate their progress. They don't send reports. They don't update their status. They don't post stories of struggle. They dedicate all that energy to what matters more: action. They don't chase attention through resilience. Don't seek sympathy through hardship. They know results are the strongest, deepest voice, and one that can't be distorted. And they are patient enough to wait for that moment. Silence also protects you from the trap of comparison. When you don't announce your journey, you're not placed on the scale. You don't need to prove you're faster than anyone, better than anyone. You just need to know you're ahead of the person you were yesterday. And that alone makes you a living version of progress, not just a performer of it. Don't confuse not sharing with not doing. Many people depend so heavily on recognition that if no one knows, they stop trying. But those who work in silence don't need applause along the way. They embrace darkness, solitude, and even quiet doubt, just to show up at the right time, in the right way, impossible to ignore. Let your arrival at the end be your declaration. No explanations, no credit seeking, no rebuttals. Just step out with stolidity, maturity, and visible results. And people will know who you are, not because of what you said, but because you were silent at the right moments to do the right work. and that is something you cannot fake, cannot copy, cannot force. That is the product of someone who chose to work in silence, so the results could speak for themselves. And when they do, everything else is just unnecessary detail. You can't rush things that are truly worthwhile. A mighty tree cannot grow overnight, and a resilient human being cannot be formed after just a few attempts. Everything deep, lasting, and truly valuable takes time, and the one who can walk through that time without panic, without doubt, without quitting, that is the one who truly owns the game. Because patience is not simply waiting. Patience is the quietest act of faith. It's a silent declaration that says, I believe what I'm planting will bloom in its season, even if today there's no sign of it. In a world obsessed with speed and instant results, the patient are often seen as the ones falling behind. But over time, they're the ones who go the farthest. Because they don't follow the anxious rhythm of the crowd, they move by their inner rhythm, where everything is guided by understanding, not pressure. The impatient tend to make hasty decisions, giving up too soon, changing direction at the first obstacle, missing out on something valuable simply because it didn't arrive fast enough. But those with true patience are different. They understand that if something is worth having, it's also worth waiting for. Patience is not passive. It is an active discipline where you keep doing, keep trying, keep building every day, without being attached to having everything happen right away. You don't need immediate results to keep working. You don't need instant recognition to know you're on the right path. You don't need external proof to maintain internal persistence. It's a powerful form of self-mastery when you no longer let outcomes define your value in every moment. The impatient are often ruled by immediate emotion. They need proof every day to keep going. They need praise every week to stay motivated. And with just one small obstacle, they spiral into doubt and then give up. They don't realize that the greatest outcomes often follow a long stretch of unseen effort, unacknowledged persistence. Achievement doesn't appear in the spotlight. It grows in the dark, where you repeat the right action while everyone else has chosen to quit. Patience is consistency without applause. It's discipline without a prize. It's easy to make promises when you're excited, easy to start when it still feels new, but it's hard to remain consistent when no one's watching, when the momentary thrill fades, when the results are nowhere in sight. And it's in those phases that you truly discover what you're doing it for. Those who live by passion will quit when the passion cools, but those who live by commitment, they continue no matter the mood. They don't ask, when will this pay off? They ask, did I do enough today? And that one question helps them endure stretches of road others cannot. Patience is a skill that builds depth. The rushed only ever skim the surface. They want to learn fast, build fast, achieve fast, and lose it just as fast. But the patient dig deep. They go to the root. They understand the principle before applying the method. They lay the foundation before raising the structure. That's why everything they build has strength, stability, and resilience when the storm hits. Don't ask why some people seem effortless yet last longer than everyone else. The answer lies in two words: patience. They've been doing it quietly for a long time, while you were still deciding which path to take. Some results don't arrive early, not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're not ripe yet. A tree doesn't bear fruit sooner just because you're eager. In fact, if you force it to fruit before its roots are deep enough, that fruit will be hollow. Life works the same way. Some doors haven't opened, not because they're not for you, but because you're not ready to walk through them. Some people haven't arrived, not because you're unworthy, but because you need to evolve one more layer to truly receive them. And patience is the stage where that layer is built. The patient hold a quiet weapon. They're not ruled by the clock. They don't measure their worth by how far others have gone. They understand that every journey has its own rhythm, and comparison only throws you off course. While others check the clock, they check their internal progress. And that's why they don't panic when others overtake them. Don't lose composure when others finish first. They know the real destination isn't about speed. It's about depth and endurance. You don't need to see progress every day to know you're improving. A seed doesn't visibly grow each day, but every day counts toward its accumulation. You can't see the roots extending deeper, but that's the most vital part. If you keep digging it up to check whether it's growing, you'll kill it with your own impatience. So learn to plant and then tend to it. Don't ask when it will bloom. Don't force it to grow faster. Just do your part daily and leave the rest to time. Patience is not a weakness. It is the most refined expression of inner strength. Only those who are truly strong dare to wait while others rush. Only those with real belief dare to continue while others quit. And only those who can manage their expectations can stay calm in the face of temporary disappointment. In a world addicted to fast, slow, but be slow with depth. Slow with certainty. Slow, but never stagnant, because slow and steady is still the most reliable pace. And you don't need to beat anyone else. You only need to beat your former self each day, with patience, with control, and with a faith that doesn't need validation. You don't need anyone's validation to be valuable. You don't need a nod, a round of applause, or a compliment to confirm that what you're doing is right. If every step in your life needs to be confirmed from the outside, then you're not truly living. You're merely existing as a reaction to others' expectations. And when those others fall silent, you'll lose your way. When they turn their backs, you'll lose your sense of direction. But those who have recognized their true worth no longer live to please. They live to express who they really are. Seeking validation is the fastest path to losing your freedom. You hand over your power of self-worth to others, and you become entangled in their emotions. They're happy, you feel useful. They ignore you, you feel invisible. They praise, you feel confident. They criticize, you shrink. Bit by bit, you lose ownership of yourself, just to chase approval from people who often don't even mean it. And then you start living as a copy, dressing according to what's trendy, speaking in ways that are likable, working by standards that get applause. But the more you do this, the emptier you feel, because you're living under the spotlight, not from within. Those who need validation to feel worthy are always fragile. They're easily hurt by silence, easily discouraged by indifference, easily lost in feelings of meaninglessness just because no one noticed them today. But real worth doesn't come from noise. It radiates quietly, even when no one's watching. Like someone who knows exactly who they are, they don't need constant affirmation. They don't need to list their accomplishments or express their hope to be recognized. They are quiet, they are steady, they are confident, and eventually recognition comes as a consequence, not as a reward. The less applause you need, the stronger you become, because you're no longer manipulated by attention. You don't create ideas just to be approved. You don't deny your truth just because it doesn't suit the crowd. And you don't measure your progress by likes or praise. You do it because you believe it's right. You do it because you know it matters. And you don't wait for outside confirmation to keep going. That is what it means to be in control, not ruled by expectation, not defeated by indifference. Imagine living in a room without mirrors. You wouldn't know what you looked like today, but you'd still be you. That is freedom. When you don't need a reflection to exist. When you don't need to be seen to feel like you're living right. True worth doesn't need a spotlight. It radiates quietly from within, from your character, your integrity, and the things you do each day, even when no one's watching. Those who no longer live for validation also become immune to praise and criticism. They hear praise, but they don't cling to it. They hear criticism, but it doesn't crush them. They treat feedback as data, not as destiny. They know what's helpful advice and what's jealousy in disguise. And because of that, they stay clear-minded, something that people who live on validation will never have, because they're too sensitive to the gaze of others. You may feel lonely when you stop seeking approval, but that's a healthy kind of solitude, the silence you need to hear your inner voice again. It's not emptiness, it's space. Space to restore your energy, to reassess your direction, to ask whether the path you're walking reflects who you really want to become. And if you keep walking that path, not for praise, but because it's right, then you've transcended the most subtle trap of the ego, the addiction to recognition. You don't have to reject compliments, but don't live for them. You don't need to resist admiration, but don't let it control you. Because people can turn away at any time. And if you haven't built your worth from within, you'll collapse the moment the lights go out. Don't let praise make you forget why you started. Don't let a few glances steer you toward a path you never truly chose. And never trade your inner voice for a few polite nods of approval. Freedom begins the moment you stop chasing validation. The moment you understand that value is not something to beg for, it's something to live out. The moment you dare to stand alone, dare to do what's out of trend, dare to persist in things that few recognize right away. And people like that, those are the ones who create real impact. They don't say, look at me, but eventually everyone looks their way. Not because they shout, but because they stand firm in silence. From today, stop constantly checking what others think of you. Stop waiting for approval to feel at peace. Stop living by someone else's standards just to be accepted in a space you don't even want to stay in for long. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to live truthfully, act with integrity, stay grounded. And everything else, if it needs to come, will arrive at the right time. Not to give you value, but to affirm what you already knew. You are enough. You have always been enough. And you don't need anyone to confirm it but yourself. There are moments when the most profound lesson you can give someone isn't what you say. It's your absence. When you quietly walk away, without arguing, without explaining, without clinging, the space you leave behind echoes like a bell, clear, cold, and powerful. In a world where everyone tries to talk more, prove more, absence becomes a special language, a language that requires no words yet penetrates deep into the other person's awareness. There are relationships in which, while you're still there, people don't listen. But when you disappear, they begin to reflect, not because they miss you, but because they suddenly realize your presence had been something real. Absence creates space for realization, something constant presence often fails to do. People tend to take the familiar for granted until it's gone. When you choose silence and withdrawal, you're not leaving behind a meaningless void. You're leaving behind a lesson. You don't need to walk away in anger. You don't need to leave final words soaked in pain. Just a silence full of dignity, a grounded retreat, and a door that closes calmly. These are enough to make someone think more deeply than any explanation could. Timely absence is the ultimate full stop. It ends things without a debate. It's how you protect your worth without needing to justify it. It's the moment you stop giving so that others can start learning to appreciate. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Not everything needs to be said to be understood. Sometimes walking away is the most definitive answer you can give. You don't need to fight to be understood, because someone who truly wants to understand would never make you struggle like that. And if someone only realizes your worth after you've disappeared, then your absence is the lesson they needed to go through, a lesson that's hard to swallow but impossible to forget. Absence is not only about stepping away from people. It's also about removing yourself from situations unworthy of your presence. You stay silent in meaningless conversations. You refrain from engaging in endless arguments. You choose to remain in your own space, where there is respect, peace, and where you are not dragged into emotional whirlpools. That's how you tell the world, I know I am valuable, and I choose places that are worthy of my presence. And you don't need to get back at those who disregarded you. You don't need to prove to someone that they were wrong to underestimate you. You simply stop showing up, and that is enough. Your absence becomes a powerful statement. I do not need to be present where I am not respected. And if they have any conscience at all, they will feel the imbalance left in your wake. They will begin to reflect, not because you said something, but because you didn't. On the path of maturity, there comes a time when you realize not every relationship is worth keeping, not every space is worth staying in. When you understand yourself deeply enough, you no longer fear being misunderstood. You simply stand up quietly and walk away from the table where you no longer feel welcomed. No resentment, no hatred, just the clarity that you've gone far enough to know not everyone deserves your time, energy, or presence. Absence is also a reminder to yourself that you don't need to do everything to hold everything together, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a relationship is to withdraw, not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough to accept that your presence is not being received the way it should. And instead of staying and sacrificing more, you choose to leave, to preserve what remains of yourself. Those with real value don't need to shout to be heard. All they need is one absence, and that is enough. True worth isn't in the volume of your presence, but in the depth of the void you leave behind when you walk away. When you no longer speak, no longer message, no longer explain, people begin to hear the echo of what's missing. And that is the loudest sound you will ever make without saying a word. Remember, you don't need to stay to prove anything. If someone can't see your value while you're still there, then you have no reason to fight for it. Let your absence be the final statement, a statement that requires no words but leaves people in a long silence. Because sometimes leaving isn't the end, it's the beginning of a new realization. Not for you, but for them. And that is enough. Silence is the most refined filter in every relationship. When you stop being the one to initiate conversations, stop being the one to send the first message, stop trying to keep the connection warm, others will begin to reveal their true nature. Those who genuinely care will find a way to stay in touch. Those who are there only out of convenience or habit will quietly fade away. And you don't need to say a word to see that. Just remain silent. It's enough. Some relationships exist only because you still speak, still ask, still care. But when you stop, the silence becomes deafening. No one asks why you're quiet. No one looks for you when you vanish. And that is the truth you need to see, not to feel bitter, but to see clearly, not to feel hurt, but to grow. Silence doesn't make you lose anyone. It simply reveals who was never really there. Don't be afraid to let go once. Not to test others, but to restore fairness to yourself. Because a relationship only holds meaning when it's mutual. When your presence is no longer taken for granted, but appreciated. If someone disappears just because you stopped being proactive, the truth is they were never truly present. They merely reflected, never initiated. That's not genuine connection, it's a one-sided dependency. Those who truly want to stay won't let you be the only one holding things together. They'll sense the space you've left and reach out, not out of obligation, but out of affection. They won't need reminders to remember your importance. They won't need prompts to know when you might need a kind word. They show up because they choose to. And when you recognize who they are, you'll also learn the most important thing. You don't need many people. You just need the right one. Your silence is a test, gentle but crystal clear. Those who care sincerely will move closer. Those who are just around for convenience will drift away. And that process doesn't require drama. You don't need to make a scene. Just stop. Stop forcing something that no longer wants to stay. And if your silence makes someone disappear, be thankful, because you've just saved yourself a great deal of time, energy, and emotion for someone who was never worth it. There are truths that only come out when you stop speaking, when you no longer explain, no longer vent, no longer update every detail of your life. The genuine ones will start checking in. The fake ones will go quiet. And the invisible gap between the two will become unmistakable. You don't need to sever ties, don't need to say goodbye, because the truth doesn't need words. It just needs enough quiet to emerge. Silence is how you assert boundaries. It's a message that says, I'm no longer willing to do everything alone. It's a signal that says, If you want to continue, you'll have to take a step too. And if they don't move forward, you don't step back either. You stay still, not to wait, but to pause everything that no longer deserves your effort. And if someone truly values you, they will move forward. If not, that empty space will be your best proof. It's not that you demanded too much. It's that they had nothing to give. You are not selfish for wanting others to take initiative. You're not cold for choosing silence as a way to reflect. You're simply learning to treat yourself more fairly. Because for too long, you've played the role of the one who keeps the fire alive, the one who holds everyone together, the one who always apologizes first, the one who always checks in first. And what did you get in return? Familiarity, treated as a given. Sincerity, seen as weakness. Then your efforts, often unnoticed. Let silence be your way of stopping at the right time, so you don't keep pouring energy into a cup that always leaks, so you don't keep trying to fill the gaps others should be helping to fill. Silence doesn't make you lose anything important. It simply allows what's not truly connected to fall away, and what remains will be what you can truly trust. Real people, real connection, presence without conditions. You deserve relationships where you don't have to worry if you're doing too much, where you don't feel guilty for not checking in one day, where you don't have to strain yourself to maintain a connection, where you can just be yourself and still be held in someone's thoughts, not for benefit, not out of habit, not out of duty, but out of affection. And to know who those people are, dare to be silent, not out of spite, but to listen for their true response. Those who truly stay won't disappear in your silence. They will knock. They will message. They will ask if you're okay, not because you demanded it, but because they genuinely care. And when you realize who those people are, you'll understand. You were never alone. You're simply filtering your life so that what's truly valuable can have room to exist more fully. And if, in the end, no one stays, then that's okay too, because at the very least, you've been honest with yourself. You were brave enough to let go, and you will begin again with no more forcing, no more pretending, no more self-deception. From there, you'll build relationships that need no testing to prove their worth, that stand solid like a silent vow. I don't need you to say much. Just don't disappear when I go quiet. There is no prison more binding and silent than the need to be accepted. You begin your journey with enthusiasm, with a desire to connect, to be seen, to be heard. But little by little, as recognition from others becomes the measure of your self-worth, you trap yourself inside an invisible cage where every step is limited by the gaze of others. You no longer live as you truly want, but as others expect you to. At the core of the need for acceptance lies a fear of rejection, a fear that if you're not good enough, you'll be left behind, a fear that if you disagree, you'll be opposed, a fear that if you live authentically, people won't love you. And to avoid that fear, you begin to adjust, altering how you speak, choosing clothes to suit others' tastes, doing things that don't align with your heart, just to get a nod of approval. But that nod comes at a steep price, your freedom. You think you're blending in, but in reality, you're being consumed. The more you live for approval, the more you must sacrifice the most original part of yourself. And ironically, the more you try to please, the more you're disrespected. People don't respect those who always say yes. They assume you have no boundaries. And gradually you lose both your confidence and your ability to define yourself. Let's be honest, how many times have you said yes when your heart whispered no? How many times have you smiled while breaking inside? How many times have you agreed just to avoid disappointing others? Every time that happens, you're denying yourself in exchange for a moment of peace, a cheap and short-lived peace that accumulates into a deep, unnamed fatigue. It's the exhaustion of not living truthfully, of constantly straining to be a more acceptable version. True freedom doesn't lie in being loved by everyone. It lies in no longer needing that love to feel enough. You don't need to be chosen to know your worth. You don't have to always align with others to feel deserving. You are not a product awaiting approval. You are a human being, and your value doesn't come from the outside, but from the solidity within. When you understand that, you'll stop begging for acceptance like someone starved. You'll begin to live as someone who has the right to choose. Someone who no longer lives for acceptance has passed the hardest test, the courage to withstand disapproval, to be misunderstood, to be disliked, and still hold their value without needing to justify themselves. They don't try to change to please others, but neither do they pick fights to assert their ego. They simply live in alignment with their truth and let their results speak the loudest. When you stop living for external approval, you'll discover something remarkable. You attract the right people for you. Without the need to cater, you'll still be cherished, because those who truly belong in your life will love your authenticity, not a version shaped to please. And those who don't, they will leave. But that departure isn't a loss. It's a liberation. You're lightening your load to walk on with honesty and peace. If you still have to perform, still have to strain, still have to monitor every word, every look, every breath to check whether others are okay with you, then you're living in a prison. Even if that prison is built from applause, praise, and pleasant signs of approval, it's still a prison because it forces you to live within limits. And no one can live fully when bound by the fear of rejection. To step out of that cage, you don't have to scream or rebel against the world. You just need to begin with one simple act. Accept yourself first. When you're the first to pat your own shoulder, to acknowledge yourself, to love yourself, you won't need anyone else to do it for you. You won't live to be chosen, but live as someone who has already chosen themselves. And that is a power no one can take away. Freedom begins with one decision. I don't need everyone's agreement to live my truth. Once you dare to live authentically, you won't be liked by everyone, but you'll respect yourself. And in that self-respect, you'll find a peace deeper than any approval others can offer. Because in the end, what allows you to live deeply and firmly is not whether others agree with you, but whether you still walk with yourself. Let go of the thirst for acceptance. Don't let it turn you into a stranger to your own soul. Don't let the fear of rejection make you accept things that aren't right. And don't let applause cost you your core. You didn't come into this world to be approved by someone. You came to live your essence and share that value with the world, with dignity, without begging, and with the pride of being exactly who you are. Every word you speak is a unit of energy leaving you. Every impulsive reaction is a piece of your self-control slipping away. And in the noisy rhythm of modern life, where everyone demands that you respond clearly, explain clearly, express your opinion, silence suddenly becomes a rare privilege, an inner sanctuary where you reclaim your own authority. Silence is not a lack of words. It is an intentional choice. It is when you're clear-minded enough to know that not everything deserves a response. Not everyone is worthy of an explanation. Not every conversation requires your presence. And not every reaction is a sign of strength. Sometimes the highest form of control is not reacting at all. In silence, you are not losing control. You are reinstating it. Because silence is the space where you can see clearly, think deeply, feel fully. It is the time to weigh a wise response instead of an instinctive one. It is the opportunity to step away from the emotional current and stand firm in composure. And those who cannot control their words are ruled by their emotions. Every time you rush to argue, to justify, to resist, you are surrendering control of your inner world to others. They don't have to do much, just provoke. And you, unable to handle the pause, react right on cue. In that moment, you are no longer self-directed. You are a reflection of the world around you. Silence is a subtle form of resistance. It isn't loud, but it unsettles the other. It isn't forceful, but it makes people pause and observe. It isn't aggressive, but it shields you better than any defensive wall. And most importantly, it keeps you at the center, where you direct the flow instead of being swept away by someone else's storm. When you practice silence as an inner habit, you begin to conserve a vast reservoir of energy. Instead of wasting it on meaningless debates, you save it for things that matter. Instead of being drawn into drama, you remain a calm observer. Instead of speaking just to win, you choose to protect your peace. And that energy-saving discipline over time accumulates into a quiet inner strength, grounded, composed, and full of gravity. Silence is also a door that leads you back inward. When the outside noise fades, you begin to hear your true voice. You begin to distinguish genuine feelings from excessive reactions. You begin to recognize what truly matters to you from what you've been pressured to care about. In a world where everyone tries to speak more, the one who chooses to stop speaking is the one reconnecting with their core essence. And you don't need to speak to prove you're right. You don't need to explain to be understood. You don't need to respond to show your stance. Because when you stay silent at the right moment, you create a space for others to reflect. That space often has more impact than any words could. It forces people to return to themselves. And from there, truth naturally reveals itself. In many situations, your silence is not just self-defense. It's a refusal to let others dictate your emotional state. You don't respond because you no longer want anyone to alter your inner rhythm. You stay calm because you no longer seek to win through arguments. You remain still because you understand that true power lies in not being blown around by every wind. Regaining control over your energy and self-mastery begins with small things. A message that doesn't need an immediate reply. A provocation that doesn't need a reaction. An invitation to debate that doesn't need acceptance. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you affirm to yourself that you're no longer controlled by the external world. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You are the one steering it. Observe those who are truly strong. They don't speak much. They don't react instantly. They are not swayed by every small wave. They sit steady in the eye of the storm, not because they are cold, but because they have mastered one thing, inner stillness. And that stillness is the foundation of all real power. No one can shake a mind trained to stay calm in silence. You don't have to live like a recluse, but you must learn to step into your zone of silence whenever needed. That is a space no one else can control but you. A place where you don't need to react immediately, don't need to prove yourself, don't need to meet expectations, but only to be present with clarity. In that space, all your core values will be restored, from energy to wisdom to self-governance. And once you've grown familiar with silence as a companion, you'll find yourself no longer easily disturbed. A criticism will no longer carry enough weight to shake you. A compliment will no longer have the power to make you lose yourself. Because you've learned the most precious truth. Mastering your reaction is mastering your destiny. And to do that, you need one thing that seems simple, but holds immense power. The courage to stay silent at the right moment. Life is never late, nor is it ever early. It simply arrives at the right moment when you are mature enough to receive it. It's not that you're slow, not that you're unlucky, not that you're being left behind. You are exactly where you're meant to be in a process designed uniquely for you, where every step, every event, every pause plays an important role. You don't need to rush time. You need to trust the process silently unfolding within you. Everyone has their own pace. Some succeed early, some bloom late. Some find love in their early years. Others must endure many seasons of solitude before meeting the right person. And some must repeat old lessons, stumble at the same spots until they truly understand, then change. You can't speed up the process with worry, nor can you force life to reveal everything before you are ready. Impatience is a form of mistrust. When you push for things to come faster, you're telling the universe, I don't believe everything will happen at the right time. But paradoxically, the more you rush, the more you slow down the journey, because you waste energy chasing an unripe future instead of investing your presence in the present, where you truly can make a difference. The process doesn't operate on emotions, it operates on inner growth. Life doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you're ready to receive. And ready doesn't come from longing, but from preparation. When you're capable of holding good things, they appear. When you're mature enough not to destroy what you once desired, opportunities come. So if you don't have what you want yet, it may not be because it's not ready, but because you're not yet the person worthy of keeping it. Remember those things you once desperately wished for, things you had to have, but when they came sooner than expected, you couldn't hold on because you lacked the inner strength to match them, and then you lost them. Sometimes with regret, sometimes with a costly lesson. But those losses help you realize this: anything that comes before its time carries risks. Anything that comes at the right time will last longer than you imagine. True maturity begins when you no longer push for everything to happen on your own schedule. Instead, you start trusting that the universe has a perfect timing for everything. Waiting ceases to be a torment and becomes a phase of training. You don't sit idle, wishing for good things to fall into your lap. You diligently nurture the roots, build foundations, cleanse your mind, and elevate your qualities. Like a gardener who can't control the weather, but can prepare the soil to welcome the blooming season. And in that process, you will sometimes feel tired, doubtful, even despairing. But don't judge the entire journey by a difficult stretch. See every delay as a moment of better preparation, every event as a trial, every departure as a sign that you are being cleared a path for someone more fitting. Nothing comes to hinder you, it comes to complete you. No one can skip stages without paying a price, and no one can avoid the process without being reminded by life. So don't look for shortcuts. Don't be impatient seeing others far ahead, because you don't know what they've sacrificed. You don't know if they can sustain it. What comes too fast makes people careless. What comes through training is usually more enduring. And you are on a journey to build a steady version of yourself, not a flashy but fragile image. Listen to life. Everything is speaking to you, not in words, but in experience. If today you don't have what you want, maybe what you need is still being perfected. If you feel stuck, maybe you haven't finished the lesson you need to learn. And if nothing has changed yet, maybe you still need a bit more time to transform within. Trusting the process doesn't mean waiting for miracles. It means continuing with calmness, working diligently without attachment, putting firm faith in what's right, even if you don't see immediate results. Because those who truly trust the process do their part well and let life handle the rest. Ultimately, the most valuable thing isn't how fast you reach the goal, it's who you become along the way. No process is wasted if you live fully present and with a learning spirit. Things come and go. But you, the person you train every day, will remain. And when you're mature enough to understand the value of time, you won't rush anymore. You will be patient, in full awareness. You will work with steadiness, and you will live with full confidence that what is meant for you will come. Not early, not late, but exactly on time.